What's going on, family? This is Scrapbook Boxing Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. I want to take a look at Peter Jackson, known as Pete the Great, or the Black Prince. He was born July 3rd, 1861 in St. Croix, West Indies. He died July 13th, 1901. He was 40 years of age at the time of his death. He was buried in Roma, Queens Island in Australia. Now, he left the Virgin Islands with his family at the age of 6. He was a heavyweight that stood 6 foot 1 inch and weighed 192 to 210 pounds. He had total bouts of 100 fights, 51 wins, 30 knockouts, 5 losses, 13 draws, and 31 no contests. Now, according to the boxing record books that you examine, you will find bouts of 85, 45 wins, 4 losses, and so on and so forth. I have over 500 record books. And it's not surprising to me that Peter Jackson will have different records according to the book that I look at. But he was managed by Larry Foley and Charles E. Parson. Peter Jackson was a descendant of Jamaican parents. Now, they were born in Montego Bay. Now, he would knock out a fighter by the name of Tom Lee, knocked him out in the 30th round to become the Australian heavyweight champion. In 1886, and a British Empire champion in 1892, he fought a fighter by the name of Jim Smith. Now, Jim Smith would be the fighter who would face Jake Kilrain in 1887. And he would face him for the Police Gazette belt, would be the World Heavyweight Championship belt. And that's when the lineage would begin. Jake Kilrain, very good fighter. He went on later to defeat Jim Smith, and he would face John O'Sullivan in 1889. And he would lose to John O'Sullivan. And John O'Sullivan would become the first American heavyweight champion of all times. Jake Kilrain and Jim Smith, 1887, for the start of the lineage of the heavyweight championship belt. But getting back to Peter Jackson. Now, Peter Jackson, as I stated, would become the British Empire heavyweight champion, 1892, by defeating Jim Smith. Now, Peter Jackson will be entered into the Ring Boxing Hall of Fame in 1956 and the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 1990. Now, the Black Prince would bang it out with future heavyweight champion, gentleman Jim Corbett. Now, these two men would have a famous 61-round draw. Peter Jackson, from my understanding, was getting the better of gentleman Jim Corbett. You see, Jim Corbett was a former bank teller, and he came from a fighting family, but he was the best of the family. Very good boxer for his time. But Peter Jackson danced around on his toes. So what you had there was a boxing match that lasted 61 rounds, and it turned out to be a draw. Now, that 61-round draw will be in favor of gentleman Jim Corbett, because John O'Sullivan, who was the heavyweight champion of the world, made it very clear that he would refuse to face any colored fighters. That was the term that was used at that time. But black fighters were never getting an opportunity to fight for any world title, let alone a heavyweight championship. That wasn't until 1908, when heavyweight Jack Johnson would chase Tommy Burns around the world and corner him in Sydney, Australia, and knock him out in round 14 for the heavyweight championship of the world. But Peter Jackson was never so lucky. After that 61-round draw with gentleman Jim Corbett, he would fight for the colored heavyweight championship with Little Chocolate, George Godfrey. He would knock out George Godfrey and become the colored heavyweight champion. Now, Peter Jackson would defeat, in most people's eyes, gentleman Jim Corbett, but like I said, they made it a draw, and that fight took place May 21st, 1891. It was very unfortunate, and it goes to show you what the black fighter had to go through just to be recognized for their worth. And it would be many years later that Gentleman Jim Corbett and Jim Jeffries would admit that Peter Jackson probably would have defeated them because he was that good. Now, like I stated, James J. Corbett was a bank teller. He was born September 1st, 1866 in San Francisco, California. Now, he died February 18th, 1933 in New York. James Corbett would become the heavyweight champion by defeating John L. Sullivan in 21 rounds in New Orleans. March 17th, 1897, James Corbett would be stopped by a bodacious solar plexus punch from the blacksmith, Bob Fitzsimmons. Now, Bob Fitzsimmons was a former middleweight champion. He would defeat the non-Parel Jack Dempsey. And then he would face Jack Root for the light heavyweight championship. He would give up that belt and he would move up to face Gentleman Jim Jeffries. They called Jim Jeffries the Boilermaker. He had an alfalfa farm. But he would become the heavyweight champion of the world when he would defeat, in two separate occasions, Bob Fitzsimmons. Bob Fitzsimmons had a vicious solar plexus punch. Very strong puncher was Bob Fitzsimmons. Now, Peter Jackson and Gentleman Jim Corbett would have a memorable 61 round draw. But in reading many books speaking to old timers and understanding the game at that time through many years of research, Peter Jackson had no chance with a victory of Gentleman Jim Corbett, although he won that fight. Now, Bob Armstrong would also become the colored heavyweight champion, was a sparring partner for Gentleman Jim Jeffries as well as Bob Fitzsimmons. But he was a sparring partner for Peter Jackson as well. And he said openly that Peter Jackson would have destroyed, if given a fair opportunity, John O'Sullivan, Jim Corbett, and Jim Jeffries. Now, between 1894, January 1st, and May 6th, Peter Jackson would face Joe Joanski, and he would have 28 3-round exhibitions in between the Uncle Tom's Cabin play that he would be involved in. 1893, between January 11th and December 23rd, he would have 51 3-round exhibitions with Joe Joanski. Now, these exhibitions were actually fights. And Peter Jackson would get the majority of the best of Joe Joanski. He would never let him take advantage of him, even though it was script. It was much faster. Had a powerful left. And Joe Joanski was known for being a master boxer. He himself would state that Peter Jackson was the greatest boxer he's ever faced in all his years and all the exhibitions that he would face him. Joe Joanski, very, very good boxer. As a matter of fact, Joe Joanski and Jack Johnson would square off. They would get caught and do some time in jail. And at that time, Joe Joanski would school Jack Johnson, teach him a few tricks, and state to him, a man your size, you would never have to worry about a smaller man coming in on you on the inside. You need to be able to control him. You need to learn how to tie him up, push him off, and punch him as you're pushing him off. You need to learn how to turn him into the sun so that he can't see the first punch coming, and let go a beautiful 1-2 punch. All that was taught to Jack Johnson from Joe Joanski. Jack Johnson already was the greatest defensive fighter in any weight division at that time. Joe Chowinski, fascinating boxer. Now, Peter Jackson was such a great fighter that in 1886, October 9th, he would face a fighter by the name of Steve Odell. And he would whip him better than he's ever been whipped before. 1887, May 21st, he would face Frank Patty Slavin. Peter Jackson and Tom Lee got into a street fight in Buffalo, New York. Lee was angry about his money that Jackson owed him for training and sparring. So they would get it on several times on the street before they took it in on the ring. Now, Patty Slavin and Peter Jackson were stablemates. And they fought plenty of times in street corners. But they would have a misunderstanding. There was a young lady by the name of Josie Leon. She was an Australian woman. She was involved in a triangle love theory between Peter Jackson and Patty Slavin. And she would tell one man one thing and the other man something else. She would play the game. And these two men would fight one another because of what's been said about them. Amazing how history repeats itself. Peter Jackson knocked out an old chocolate that they called George Godfrey for the colored heavyweight championship belt. He was a phenomenal fighter, was Peter Jackson. Never got his just due. Never given an opportunity to fight for the colored heavyweight championship early on, nor was he given an opportunity to face John L. Sullivan for the World Heavyweight Championship belt. Unfortunately for the black fighter, this is just a token of what was going on at that time. But Peter Jackson was the Australian heavyweight champion, the British heavyweight champion, and the colored heavyweight champion of the world. Outstanding fighter was Peter Jackson. Salute to Peter Jackson, dynamite fighter, one of the greatest fighters of all times. Now, when I did my top 10 of the greatest fighters of all time, I had the colored heavyweight champions and Black Murderers Row ranked number 10 collectively. And Peter Jackson is on that list. He was an outstanding heavyweight and phenomenal fighter. Like I said, he would stand on his toes and he would box around. He knew about the jab at that time. He knew how to turn a man, how he would hold him and move him around the ring. He knew how to uppercut. He knew how to throw left crosses, punch to the body. And this was in the 1800s. You don't fight great fighters like Peter Jackson anymore. He was a phenomenal fighter. One of the greatest fighters of all time. Salute to Peter Jackson. Thanks for hanging in there with me. All great fights and all great fighters will never be forgotten on my channel. Salute to my subscribers. Salute to the colored heavyweight champion from St. Croix, West Indies. The Australian heavyweight and British heavyweight champion. Salute.